It's the Copa Libertadores final November 2024. The game had barely started when all Botafogo's fans' hearts stopped.
The match official, Tejo, has reached to his pocket and Tejo has a red card in his hand. It is a red with 60 seconds on the clock for the midfielder Gregory.
This brutal foul by Gregory caused him to see a red card in the second minute. The fate of the entire season would be sealed exactly now. They were so close to their first Libertadores title, but had to play the entire final with one man down. They were first in the league, but still had two potentially difficult matches to play with Palmeiras within striking distance. The fans were starting to get anxious, because this wouldn't be the first time they would bottle a title that seemed so close. But as you might well know, Botafogo this time got their redemption and their first Libertadores title ever, a Gloria Eterna, eternal glory. And they won their first Brasileirão title in 29 years. It was absolute remedy for the fans' traumatized souls. And all this only 4 years after having been relegated to Serie B. It's a true Cinderella story, but is it truly a miracle? I don't think so, because Botafogo's comeback is inextricably linked to one man, John Textor, and a hell lot of money. Do you think such investors do football good, or are they simply buying the success and destroying the game? Let's discuss this and let's take a look back at Botafogo's epic 2024 season. Welcome to Valentin's Football Corner. First of all, thank you from all of my heart. I'm super grateful for your support on my first video that I did about the Botafogo 2023 season. And you literally bombarded me with comments. Talk about Botafogo 2024 season when they won everything. And yeah, I don't want to be unfair. I had this in my mind before also. I'm gonna do a video about Botafogo's 2024. Here it is. Let's take a look at the Libertadores season first. As you may remember from my last video, Botafogo actually bottled direct qualification for the Copa Libertadores. They had to go through the qualification rounds first. And they played Aurora from Bolivia and Red Bull Bragantino from Brazil. They won both of their knockout rounds to qualify directly for the Copa Libertadores. So the fact that they had bottled it the year before actually didn't matter. They were in the group stage playing the Libertadores of 2024. And in the group stage they actually lost their first two games, but then went on an absolute run and a streak to make it into the round of last 16. And their run didn't stop there. They absolutely swept into the final and beating several strong teams on the way there. Like Palmeiras in the round of last 16, their absolute nemesis from 2023, São Paulo FC in the quarterfinals, and Peñarol from Uruguay that had surprisingly qualified for the semifinals of this year's Libertadores. They went on to play the final against Atlético Mineiro from Belo Horizonte from Brazil in the legendary El Monumental in Buenos Aires. And this is where it gets epic.
The match official, Tejo, has reached to his pocket and Tejo has a red card in his hand.
And the game started absolutely wild. As we've seen in the intro, Botafogo got a red card in the second minute and had to play almost the entire game with one man down. But Atlético Mineiro also weren't in the best of their forms. They hadn't won a single league match before the final of the Libertadores in 2 months. So they actually had to win the final, being absolutely out of form, so nothing was decided yet. And Botafogo, even with one man down, played an absolutely miraculous performance. In the 35th minute, fans started to get a sense of the miracle that could happen that night.
Levou pro meio, jogada boa, entrou na área, Luiz Henrique vai cruzar, ameaçou, mudou de ideia, se rolar pra trás é bom. Ah, vem o chute do Marlon, a bola tá viva na confusão. Luiz Henrique! Luiz Henrique! Luiz Henrique! Gol! Do Botafogo!
And it wasn't stopped there. 8 minutes later, still in the first half, Botafogo were awarded a penalty.
Teles, pé esquerdo na bola, olhou, correu, bateu, é gol! Gol!
They were 2-0 up at halftime with, remember, one man down since the second minute. An absolutely convincing performance, heroic, miraculous, that made Botafogo fans all over the world go crazy. And finally gave them a sense of the remedy they could get after this horrendous season of 2023. but there were 45 minutes to go. Atlético Mineiro really wanted to mess with Botafogo fans' cardiac health that night. They pulled one back.
Também o Vargas para a parte ofensiva. Escanteio que o Atlético cobra com o Hulk. Jogou na área, a bola tá no alto, a cabeçada dada, gol do Atlético.
2-1, and there was still almost the entire second half to go. And Botafogo were one man down, they had to defend now, they had to fight. And Atlético Mineiro could have made it 2-2, they had chances. But there would still be one goal in this match, with the last kick of the game. Botafogo had really created the heroic exploit. Only 1 year after 2023's tragic losses and bottlings, they were finally on top and had their first Libertadores title ever. And with one man down, all of this seemed even more heroic. And in the beginning of the match, I don't think how many people actually believed that this could come true like that. But it came. And Botafogo in absolute ecstasy.
Tá acabado! Acabou, gente! 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 Acabou! Acabou, gente! A gente esperou, a gente queria, a gente sonhou. E esse jogo acabou. O Botafogo foi campeão da Libertadores com um jogador a menos durante 128 minutos. Levanta a taça, Botafogo!
Let's also talk about Botafogo's 2024 league season, which was way more stable than 2023 and managed them to be in the struggle for the title up until the last match day. But that didn't mean that they didn't have to bite their nails until last match day. And everything could have gotten wrong like 3 match days from the end still. They were playing Palmeiras. You remember in 2023, watch my video about that Botafogo lost almost everything in an absolutely dramatic, absurd game against Palmeiras that decided the entire season. And this time, they were playing them again in a decisive match for the title, 3 match days from the end. And the game was also played 3 days before the Libertadores final in the stadium of Palmeiras. So 1 decisive game and 3 days later the other decisive game. Botafogo's entire season depended on those 2 games. But this time, against all anxiety, Botafogo managed to do it. They scored goal. Goal. And goal. 3-1 the final score, an absolutely convincing performance, snatching away the title from Palmeiras in their own stadium. Botafogo now had 73 points, Palmeiras only 70, and Botafogo a very, very decisive advantage for the last 2 games of the season. However, the league still wasn't decided. 37th match day, second last game, Botafogo were traveling to Internacional, to Porto Alegre, the team that had until now been the strongest team of the second half of the season. Botafogo could still lose the title, if not to them, but lose the match and maybe lose the title to Palmeiras in the end. But Botafogo also managed to win there, another heroic performance. So at last match day, everything was set up for an epic party in Botafogo's Estádio Nilton Santos. They had 3 points ahead of Palmeiras, which didn't mean that they had the title secure yet. They could still lose it to Palmeiras. Botafogo lost at home and Palmeiras won against Fluminense in the parallel game. But it became apparent that it wouldn't come like that. Palmeiras were losing the game already in the first half and in the end lost 1-0 to Fluminense. And Botafogo played against a São Paulo squad that essentially was the reserve squad or at least mixed. It wasn't their A team. And even though Botafogo, who had gone up 1-0, conceded the equalizer at some point and actually started to get anxious a little bit, an absolutely heroic moment unfolded in the end when, in the last minute of the game, Botafogo scored the winner.
1968, 1995 e o Botafogo pode vencer. Olha o gol! Olha o gol! Gol!
And guess who it was?
Gregory! Gregory! Gregory!
It was Gregory, the player who had seen the red card in the second minute of the Libertadores final. He made up for this mistake and scored the decisive goal, or at least the last goal of the season, the goal that sealed Botafogo's championship. What a moment. So what can I say? Congratulations to Botafogo for this epic and successful 2024 season. For you fans of Botafogo, I'm really glad that your team won all of that you got your redemption for the really, really traumatizing 2023 season. I mean, I know the feeling of painful losses in football. I've also had my team having painful defeats that also felt unjust, and I'd love such a redemption in football. I think I personally still quite didn't get it, but you got it, and from all my heart I'm really glad for you that it came that way. And so I wanted to make this video to be fair to you Botafogo fans, to also mention the success that your team actually got, but also because it's another story of heroicism, of great emotions and absolutely crazy games in South American football that I'm so passionate about. Let's get into the other, more debatable part of my video, if I should say. Because after the Libertadores final, there were pictures being published in several media showing Botafogo investor John Textor with this gigantic paycheck of prize money in his hand. Bruh. I want to take this as a starting point to discuss about the background of Botafogo's 2024 season, their comeback from second division to Libertadores champion in only 4 years, and a trend that is a big trend in football in general and gives me much to think, which is investors and large sums of money that decide about success or not in football, and about the fates of entire clubs. And as someone who's being trained as a journalist, I feel compelled to tell you that, of course, now I'm gonna mix facts with my own opinion, so feel free to discuss with me in the comments, stay respectful. But I'm also really curious to hear your perspectives on the Botafogo case, but also on investors in football in general, because I think it's a very important topic that we need to talk about. First of all, I have to say that Botafogo fans were really grateful to John Textor after the 2024 season. There was like a banner of fans that said "Obrigado, John," thank you, John. And Botafogo fans kind of saw John Textor as the savior, as someone who had finally brought back success that was lacking for so many years. And I kind of can understand this perspective, because with John Textor's managerial help, Botafogo was able to re-get glory and greatness that they didn't have in years. But in my opinion, you also have to take a broader look at the whole phenomenon of investors in football, and also at the person of John Textor, who doesn't only invest in Botafogo but also in other clubs. Football has just become a business worldwide where money plays an increasingly big role, and sometimes to a point that for me it takes away the whole pleasure that football gives, and all of this also plays into this huge Botafogo success. So we have to talk about it. And I'm not trying to criticize John Textor to spoil your 2024 season, dear Botafogo fans. That's not my goal. I want to talk about the phenomenon in general and about my opinions. So, who's John Textor? John Textor is a rich businessman from the United States who has made most of his money with a company that made special effects for movies. So originally it doesn't have anything to do with football. But in 2021 he decided to buy shares of Botafogo, because since 2021 Brazilian clubs had the right to sell the majority of their shares to investors by transforming the club's structure into a company that is allowed to sell those shares. And John Textor was one of the first to take advantage of that rule and buy 90% of Botafogo's shares and became quasi the only owner. So with his sports investment company Eagle Holding, he invested over the course of the years over 50 million euros into Botafogo, which is around 320 million reais, which is a lot of money on the scale of the Brazilian league if you consider with what money there was operated in the last years. So Botafogo in 2024 had the 4th highest market value in their squad of the entire Brazilian league. So even though they had just recently come back from 2nd division, it was certainly not a miracle that they were playing on top of the table. And another problem that goes beyond Botafogo even is multi-club ownership. John Textor doesn't only own Botafogo, he also owns Molenbeek in Belgium, a bit random if you ask me. He owns 45% I think of Crystal Palace, but wants to get rid of this. But most importantly, he also owns the majority of shares in Olympique Lyon in France. And this club has recently struggled with immense financial problems. And this is where the problem comes in, because Botafogo money can and will be used in part to solve this Lyon problem. For example,
Luiz Henrique! Luiz Henrique! Luiz Henrique!
Luiz Henrique from Botafogo, an absolute pillar of the 2024 team who helped them win the Brazilian League and the Libertadores, was sold off to Zenit St. Petersburg.
Bruh.
And a huge part of this transfer money is gonna be used to try to save Lyon's finances. How this works in detail, my German friend Johannes Skiba has made a video where he kind of explains how all of this went. I've put the link in the description down below so you can watch it. I highly recommend his channel. He's also making content about South American football in German. Follow him to make sure to not miss out on any important topic. But this to me just seems completely unnatural. I mean, why should Botafogo be responsible for the saving of Olympique Lyon, at least in part? Why should a club be responsible for saving another in that way, in this random way? I mean, Botafogo and Lyon most likely would never have a match against each other, and now their fates are linked just because the same investor bought them. And if something goes wrong with one club, that's the risk. Things can go wrong with other clubs too. So if Lyon really crumbles and their finances get absolutely trashed, who says that this won't have very bad repercussions for Botafogo as well? I'm also asking this to our Botafogo fans who are watching this video. Isn't this something that should be avoided, in your opinion? It kind of sometimes feels like football has become like a side hustle, a pay-to-win side hustle for very rich people that sometimes a little bit feel like Clash Royale. I don't know if you know this game, but there you can basically only go to the top divisions if you invest some money to buy better characters and stuff. And sometimes football to me just feels like that. And that's boring. Shouldn't be like that. There's no place for romanticism, heroicism and stuff, and epicness. Simple as that. And in the worst case, this can even go terribly wrong and part in the complete other directions. Entire clubs have perished in the past because of mismanagement and not because they were essentially playing bad. One thing that I find interesting is that in Germany we have a rule that's called 50+1. The members always have 50% of voting rights plus 1 vote. So they always have a guaranteed majority of the voting rights. This is not a rule that doesn't have its exceptions, and it's not very sound, but it is there. And it is still a rule that's being followed by most of the clubs here. And in the eyes of German fans, it's a really high value. And when the German league wanted to open itself for foreign investors to invest money in it, German fans were fiercely protesting, throwing tennis balls onto the pitch, and almost provoking that games had to be finished entirely because of the protests. And they were successful. 50+1 stood, and up until today, officially, there's no possibility of an investor from outside to acquire the majority of voting rights in a German football club, at least in principle. And I'm glad they succeeded, because this guarantees at least that this value of fan participation has a practical applicability. So if as fans you want to participate, you have the possibility. And in the world of investors, in the world of multi-club ownership, the fate of the clubs is not negotiated and not decided anymore on the level of the people who love those clubs, who dedicate so much of their heart and passion to them, but is negotiated on the level of a select few who have the power to buy and do those negotiations and determine the club's direction. And it would of course also be delusional to say that football shouldn't be a business, because it is. That's the reality we live in. We have to cope with it. But I think there's one way to do business and there's other ways to do business. You can be down to earth, sustainable, make an emphasis on participation, or you can just go and do risky capital investments that want profit on the short term and take risks for that. And I think that John Textor is not on this down-to-earth side of the spectrum. He's kind of the opposite of that. His investments are not without risk, as we've seen with Olympique Lyon's difficult financial situation. And the fate of Lyon is linked to other clubs like predominantly Botafogo now. And in the best case for both clubs, they can just exchange players and kind of build up both clubs parallelly to go back on top, which for me would be an unfair advantage over other clubs, which is also a problem in other models of multi-club ownership, like predominantly Red Bull, who just practice it without paying attention to financial fair play legislation. Or in the worst case, one club could crumble and the other club could be tried to be taken responsible for saving that club, or could even crumble with the other club. Or one club could be declared the principal club that should be supported, and the other club is kind of like only the farm team or the transit station. So to you Botafogo fans, would you want Botafogo to become kind of a transit station, an outpost of Olympique Lyon, responsible to build a strong squad in Europe? There have been people saying that they feel that, and that this could happen in the future. And it's not impossible. Even though Botafogo has now won big titles, doesn't mean that the whole model they're into now couldn't really harm them in the future. And that's just the thing that I wish for no fan and for no club to depend on. But more and more do today. I don't know how you feel about it, write it in the comments down below. But I personally, I'd like to just being able to enjoy my club and the football it plays and not worry about if they could be, I don't know, destroyed by bad management and not because they're playing badly. And with that being said, let's conclude. And this video kind of shows us the two sides of the medal of the world we live in and football. On one hand, we have management that gets more and more important, money, cash flow, investments. On the other hand, we have also seen why we still love football so much. Botafogo won the Libertadores 2024 the way they did. They won their first league title in 21 years. And it was epic, it was heroic. And the fans were joyful about that. And it's also one of the reasons why I love South American football so much. It showed us all of that, epic games, absolutely crazy atmospheres, emotions, and all of this authenticity that is in the football culture of this continent, which makes South America the most beautiful football continent in the world for me. And this is why I did this channel, this is why I want to do this journey with you together. Make sure to subscribe to be on board to South America and discover the best of the football there. If you haven't watched my video about Botafogo's 2023 season yet, make sure to do so now, because to understand what happened in 2024, you absolutely have to know what happened in 2023. It was one of the biggest bottle jobs, one of the biggest downfalls you've ever seen in football history, a thing to absolutely not miss out. And see you again on this channel. This is Valti's Football Corner. Till next time.